Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Ashley Barlow Company podcast. I'm Ashley Barlow, your host. If you are a parent, a teacher, or someone who works at a school, or you're a community member, a volunteer, or a staff member at an organization that supports people with special education plans, a coach, a tutor, or even a grandparent, you're in the right place. Sit back with an ice-cold glass of lemonade, put on your walking shoes and grab some headphones, roll down the windows and cruise. Ready, set, go. Educate, advocate, collaborate. Welcome back to another episode of Special Education Advocacy with Ashley Barlow. I'm Ashley Barlow, and I am so happy you are here. Okay, we have two fun announcements, two fun things for you to help us with and to get some free stuff. So I'm real excited to share this with you. Number one, we are nearing our 200th episode. Yeah, we're 4 years into this business existing. We started with the podcast. We take about 2 episodes off per year. Sometimes, maybe we take about 3 off, because usually we take 2 off when I'm in my summer swim meet season. And then oftentimes I get behind and overwhelmed and I just have to take a week off in the middle. That's kind of unplanned, because sometimes we record like week to week and I just don't have anything backlogged. So yeah, I can't believe we're at 200 episodes. It just shocks the pants off of me. This has been such a joy. I have to say, so one thing, okay, let me tell you how you can help with the 200th episode. And then I'm going to tell you one surprising reason why I find the podcast to be so enriching. So the way that you can help is we are asking you to submit questions to interview me for the podcast. So I'm going to drop a link in the show notes. You can also go back through my social media and find it there. But it's coming up in mid-September. And what's going to happen is you're going to record questions and I'm going to answer them. And it's going to be real fun. The questions can be on special ed advocacy, negotiation. It could be a legal question. It could be about me. It could be about things I love, like swimming and gardening and reading and cooking. I love a lot of things. Or it could be about Jack, but know that I do share a lot about my children. Griffin doesn't like for me to share a ton, but I really share almost everything I'm comfortable sharing. So if you have a burning question about Jack, you might ask 2 questions, because chances are I might not answer the question about Jack. So, and I might generalize it, because a lot of times people say, what did you do in 7th grade science? And I'm like, well, what I did doesn't matter, but here are some ideas to help a child with an intellectual disability or with a physical disability or whatever in 7th grade science. So I might generalize it. Okay, so the way that you do that, we have this website thing called SpeakPipe, I think. I'll put the link in the show notes, and then you click on that link and you literally just record it. My friend Kara Riska over at the Special Needs Mom podcast did this for one of her milestone episodes, and it was so fun. And I literally, I spent a lot of time in the bathtub. I literally recorded my thing for her in the bathtub, and you can even hear it kind of echoey, but that's me. I'm in the bathtub a lot. So, and you're probably going to hear a lot of background noise in this episode. I'm sorry. I'm super fidgety. I have a really, really, really hurt hip. I mean, not like long-term hurt. Don't worry about me. I hurt my left foot, and then my right hip got mad because I was limping a little bit, and my body doesn't like change. And so it's my piriformis. I hope your piriformis is doing okay, because it's painful. It woke me up. All right. So I really, really, really hope that you will submit questions. It's going to be fun. I'm excited to hear what you want to know and what you would like for me to elaborate on. Now, I was starting to tell you why the podcast has been so enriching. And so let me tell you, I work by myself. I do have 9 people that work for me in my law firm. And, sometimes those people cross over to Ashley Barlow Company. All 9 are probably not on contract at Ashley Barlow Company, but whatever. And they, will do paralegal. Some of them are paralegals. Some of them are advocates that will do file reviews for me or will even attend meetings for me, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't talk to those people every day. I don't even talk to one of those people each day. I used to practice with my dad. Technically, I don't anymore. Since before the pandemic, for the last 6 or 7 years, I don't even talk to my dad every day. I talk to, between 3 and 10 clients a day. But there are some days where I don't talk to any clients. And, since I moved my office to my house, sometimes I don't even leave my office. When my office was, when I owned a little building, I would at least walk to the gas station and get a Coke. But my job is pretty isolated. And in case you can't tell, I like people a lot. And so, I think my AirPod died. I was afraid that was going to happen. So, okay, sorry if the audio changed. So, this podcast has been so enriching because I don't have a ton of people around in my everyday life to tease things out with. And I like deep dives. I like to assimilate wild amounts of information into something that makes sense. I like to, learn literally everything there is to learn about a topic, like the science of reading or, behavior supports for a child that is experiencing X, Y, and Z. PDA, for example. But I don't have a whole lot of people then to be like, here's how you solve that. And then the other flip side of that is I do have a lot of clients that I can help. And clients, one of the reasons why I went to law school was I wanted to keep learning. And in this field, special education, advocacy, and law, there's a lot to keep learning because, just this week I learned about a new disability. And I was like, how do you spell that? Because I can't wait to look that up. Is it a chromosomal deletion or addition? Is it, is it this or is it that? I just love to keep learning. And sometimes I have ginormous epiphanies, or sometimes I explain something really well in the moment and I'm like, gosh, more people need to hear that. And so the podcast gives me a reason to keep researching, a reason to assimilate all of the crazy stuff that's bouncing around in my head into lists and things that people can do something with. But it also gives me the opportunity to share some of the insight that I have gotten in helping hundreds of clients. I wish I had kept track at some point, with a larger audience. And so thank you for supporting us. There's all kinds of other reasons that I love the podcast, and this one's entirely selfish, but I think it's important that I find great satisfaction and joy in many parts of it, and that's just one. So there you have it. Thank you for helping us with the podcast. Now we're 8 minutes in and I've droned on and I haven't told you the other way that you can help. So let me tell you the other way that you can help. The other way that you can help is we are also doing a little bit of market research. I'm going to go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. I am working on a series of new products for you. And it is a video series that I think is going to be little snippets. So, I have the special education and advocacy lab, which teaches primarily parents, but people that sit at the IEP table or support people at the IEP table, kind of like nuts and bolts. I call it IEPs 101. And some of the feedback I'm getting back is it's kind of intimidating because it takes a solid day to go through, or it would take an hour a day for a week to go through. Now, I'm a deep dive person. And so when I created this, I got feedback saying, yeah, people like information in 12 to 18 minute videos. And I was like, who would like that? because that is definitely not my style. But I have taken a lot of digital trainings on online marketing because this is a new thing for me, doing this Ashley Barlow Company business. And guess what? I actually like 12 to 18-minute videos too. I don't like 45-minute videos. And so I'm revamping. I'm not really revamping the lab, but I am creating video series on that. So I'm not going to do 12 minutes on inclusion. I'm going to do 12 minutes on a component to inclusion. And then we might bundle 2, 3, 4, 5 things together to sell them as a bundle. So it might be like behavior and inclusion bundle or something like that. So we are currently working on branding. We are working, I think we have a name for this new product. We are working on logos, and I am working on the products. I expect that I will be able to launch them. Hopefully, they'll just come out little by little, but I expect that we will be able to launch them late this fall or early in the winter. And so I need your help. I need your help helping me with the last little bit of the design of the concept. And then some, like, what are you looking for kind of stuff. And I also threw in some questions about like just general business stuff, because if I'm doing market research, I may as well hear it all from you. And so I have an anonymous survey that you can complete. And if you do complete it, which I am so grateful for, I have several of them and they are wildly helpful already, I will give you the lab for free. The lab is $149 and you're getting it for free. I've never given it away for free like this, but I'm so excited for you to access it. So if you would like to help me out, the survey should take you about 15 minutes, and I would be so grateful, in fact, that I'm giving you away like my cornerstone resource, the Special Education and Advocacy Lab, IEPs 101 for parents. 6.5 hours of content. So, link in the show notes, do the survey, get the lab, make me happy. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you. Okay, today we're going to talk about how to prepare for intake when you go to a special education attorney or advocate. This one I have no notes for because I could do this in my sleep. In fact, sometimes I do because I have generalized anxiety disorder, and that is the kind of stuff that keeps you up and you perseverate on new ideas for intake. So, see, the hip pain is making me a little spicy today. So, I actually have 2 different ways to do intake. The first way that I do intake is I do 10-minute intake calls. And then I do like an hour-long consultation that I charge for. The 10-minute is not charged. And really, what I do at the 10-minute is I tell people, I'm not taking notes. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes to summarize the key points for me. And then I'm going to give you 2 minutes of, and then ultimately what I'm trying to give you is whether or not I think I can get involved. You know, as an attorney, I have to do conflict checks and that kind of stuff. And then also make sure I know what I'm doing. And then B, try to give you a price estimate, because as an attorney and as an advocate, I have different ways that I'll get involved. And so I try to, highlight 1 or 2 of those in that call. Then for the hour-long consultation, of course, I'm taking more information. So I'm going to talk about that one second. Okay, so regardless of whether or not you're calling, like, just to get basic information from an attorney or an advocate, or you're attending that first meeting, I'm going to try to give you a sense of what you need for those meetings in order to get your best bang for the buck. Because, you're calling people that are busy, people that are expensive, and sometimes you're calling people that aren't the people. You're calling the receptionist or the paralegal or whomever, and you want to make sure that you are being compelling enough that the people want to help you. So when people call me for a 10-minute intake, what I normally do is I get down their vital information that you have memorized, right? Like name, address, telephone number, email address. Sometimes I think about your email address, like which one do I want to give them? Sometimes people kind of pause at that. I want the child's name. I want their school district. I want the name of their school. I want their grade. I want their date of birth. All of those can trip people up. And of course, sometimes it's, specific. Well, he's enrolled in this district, but he goes to this particular school, or he's enrolled in this district and he's an alternate placement and he's located at, out in Utah or something. And then I always say, what would you say is your child's primary diagnosis? Now that really trips people up. But what I'm kind of hinting at here is you need like a 2-minute elevator speech on your child's profile. So mine would look like, my son is 14 years old. He's in 8th grade at his local public school, and he has Down syndrome. He also has a host of other diagnoses. I would say the thing that impacts him the most significantly at school is ADHD and anxiety. What Down syndrome looks like in him is not like the happy-go-lucky, very compliant stereotype, but the wild, spicy, obstinate, and hilarious stereotype. Now, just FYI, I don't think obstinance is obstinance, and I'll talk about that if I have more time later. But really, the ADHD is what affects him the most. So he has this really strong attention function. We get a lot of behaviors for attention and, kind of like surface level impulsivity. Right now, that's looking like the following, and I would list out a few of his behaviors. As you know, he's cussing a lot. And then, so the next thing that you need to know, and so like, by the way, I usually say, and then are there any other like secondary diagnoses that you think are important for a 10-minute intake call? Now, when you go to your longer call, you like a consultation, an hour, you want to have a list of their diagnoses and also how those things impact them. I think that's the most important thing. And I think that is also one of the things that parents struggle with the most. What is my child's diagnosis and how does it impact them? What does it look like in them? Both of my boys have ADHD and I have ADHD. It looks entirely different in all three of us. Entirely different. There are things that Jack does that I experience. There are things that Griffin does that I experience. But on a whole, in a gamut, I'm a girl, I mask well. I have extraordinarily good executive functions because my body doesn't like the impact of ADHD. Griffin is so unaware that he's pubescent, right? His executive functions have completely spiraled and he doesn't know it. He truly doesn't know it. And then Jack's ADHD is, not so much. We don't really see the executive functioning. Like he's blissfully unaware that that's even an option for him to work on. Because frankly, we have bigger fish to fry. So the impulsivity and the like run by a motor and the talking all the time and, those things are like the need for proprioception. All of those things are what it looks like in him. So, I'm a stranger when you call me. I need to know if you're like the inattentive, staring off into space kind of diagnosis of ADHD, or if you are the pubescent, high-performing student, anxiety, like hidden anxiety kind of ADHD, or if maybe you're the pubescent kid with ADHD who is like really frustrated and misunderstood and like body checking teachers on the way out of the classroom. Thousands of different ways that ADHD looks, okay? And that's just one example, right? So what is your child's diagnosis and how does it impact them? I think that is super duper important. And I think you need a 2-minute elevator speech on that, and you need like an 8-minute elevator speech on that, or a 5-minute elevator speech on that. Then also in the 10-minute intake, I'm going to ask about medication that your child takes. Just honestly, it helps me understand the severity of the disability or the impact of the disability. And then I am going to say, why don't you give me a 2-minute synopsis on what's going on and what you're looking for? And then I'm also going to say, well, and I'm going to tell him, like, then what I'm going to do is I'm not taking notes, but I'm listening very intently, and I'm going to give you some insight on how I think I can get involved, as well as a price estimate. This is where people really get tripped up. If they don't get tripped up on diagnosis and impact, they get tripped up on what's going on. Even in your 1-hour consult, I think it's important to give like a 2-minute start to finish overview of what's going on. A lot of people can't describe, this is a behavior case, this is a reading case, this is an inclusion case. This is the kind of situation where my child is not able to access the least restrictive environment because the school doesn't know how to support their behavior. That example is given to me probably 15 times a year. And I would say of the 15, only 2 people are able to say it that way. So, it's not that you have to fit inside of a trend at all, but a lot of times you spend a lot of really valuable time, or clients spend a lot of really valuable time trying to explain what the situation is without really getting to the point, without really getting there. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, yeah, I don't know what it is. That's why I'm hiring an attorney or an advocate. So the way that I came up with the idea for this episode is I was thinking back to when I hired an advocate for Jack. So Jack we had, as you know, an LRE discussion when he was entering kindergarten. And I, was definitely at my wit's end. And, you're a terrible advocate for your own child, which is why you're listening. Or at least I am. And so I was like, I need to hire somebody. And there's this very well-known advocate in Cincinnati. And so I hired her. And I was literally driving up his file of documentation. Literally thought I was going to drop it off. And I ended up staying there for 3 hours. And really, because I couldn't say what the problem was, the problem was they won't let him into school. But I couldn't really articulate anything succinctly. I had to tell a bunch of stories. And so she would ask a question, I'd be like, well, it's like this. And then I would tell a story. Or she would ask a question and, I would have to tell another story, maybe about his behavior, maybe about his learning profile, maybe, oops, the dog saw something, et cetera, et cetera. And that took 3 hours. And I was paying her like, $100 an hour. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just paid $300 to tell stories about him. How dumb am I? She sat there and listened. And a lot of attorneys will sit there and listen because that's like an old school attorney. That's kind of what they do. They do it, I don't know that they do it on purpose, but I think that they do it like subconsciously, intentionally, because they're making money, right? So be able to explain the problem succinctly as possible, but not so succinctly that you aren't really giving the spirit of it. So if you have to include a little anecdote, if you have to include a simple example, fine, and I think it's perfectly fine and probably recommended to say, of course, this goes a lot deeper. I'm just trying to give you like a 2-minute synopsis, right? Sorry about the dog. So that is, generally speaking, what I do in a 10-minute intake. Then what do we do in the hour-long consult? The first, I gave you a little bit of information, like I want a little bit more deeper information on other diagnoses, medication, I want a little bit more of an insight. The first thing I can tell you that is super important is to have your documentation. If you have your child's special education information, I would at least bring with me and have organized chronologically evaluations and IEPs. If you don't have anything else, I do think that is okay, but evaluations and IEPs for 3 years. If you have progress monitoring, the graphs are way more helpful than the words. So if you have progress monitoring, if you have report cards, if you have like the specific data that you're there to look at, like reading scores or ABC data for behavior or something, I think that is super helpful, especially if you've assimilated it into something that somebody can look at and quickly assess in that hour-long consult. A lot of times people come to me and they're only concerned about STAR reading scores or MAP reading scores. And I'm like, well, first of all, that's one data point. Second of all, there's no way that I could look at MAP scores over the course of time unless I have that printout, which schools can pull in like 30 seconds, that shows the MAP scores for kindergarten through today in math and then also in reading. And so if you can pull that, that would be super helpful to take with you. You can do that electronically and email it to the attorney or advocate prior to the meeting, or you can do that, in real time and take a binder. Don't forget, if you take them your documents, their office is likely going to charge you to scan those into their computer and to save them. You're probably going to get an admin fee for that. So you want to take that information. And then, surprise, surprise, instead of just a 2-minute elevator speech about what your primary issue is, you want to be able to comprehensively describe your kind of situation, your beef for them, with the intent that they're going to be able to then dive into the documentation that you provide to them and know what they're looking for. We are issue spotters. And so you are giving them the issue, and then they are going into the documentation to look. One caveat, sometimes people say, I'm really just here because I know that my child is not making progress. I know that school really doesn't know what to do with them. And so I'm here to get your insight on how we can make this better. Great. I start with the IEP, and I'll make all kinds of recommendations along the IEP. I think that's perfectly fine. But to the extent that you've got an issue like reading supports, inclusion supports, behavior supports, social emotional supports, disciplinary matter, etc., be able to tell your story and then spot the issues so that then they can go in and do their file review. I think most of us start by getting some background information and then going into the paperwork. So, key tips here. You do not want to give the entire story. They will come back and ask you for supporting details for the story later. You do not need to give a synopsis of every single data point. They will probably come back and ask you for more of that, and maybe even ask you to document that kind of stuff like in a chart or in, a more descriptive document. Sometimes people give me key players. They're like, this is the name of the principal. This is the name of the special ed director. Oh, another thing that you might want to put in your documentation is any email or correspondence that's like the heart of the problem, right? Like if they're predetermining services, where's the email that shows that? Or the prior written notice, the conference summary, the meeting minutes, the PRO1, if you're in Ohio or another state that calls it that, which is goofy. And you can even highlight that. Like, this is the sentence that I think is concerning. You're trying to make the job of the attorney or advocate easier because then it's cheaper. Time is money in this situation. So this is like an everything but the kitchen sink, but in an organized and condensed version. That's what you're trying to do. My number one tip to help you to be able to tell your story to an attorney or advocate more succinctly, because remember, time is money, is to outline it. To outline the issues. So you would say the number one issue is, LRE. And then to give 3 or 4 supporting facts, places to see that in the documentation that you're going to provide. And then you go through everything else. And then to make sure that you give the attorney or advocate a list of what you're looking for. What do I want? That is so important. Sometimes people don't know what they want. A lot of times people don't know what they want. And it's really hard to go into a negotiation or into an educational, a discussion in an IEP team meeting without knowing what you want. So unless your want is, I don't know, my child just isn't making progress and I want your insight on it, Mrs. Advocate, know what you want. I want for my child to be able to access this classroom. I want for my child to be able to have more opportunities to interact organically with their gen ed peers. I want for my child to get behavior supports. Okay. And it could be that your desires, your want is completely unreasonable, but at least the attorney or advocate is going to know what you're looking for and then can use that as a starting point to suggest additional things or different things for the list of demands or desires for when you ultimately go into a negotiation or discussion with the school team. So that is what I recommend for your initial consult. Having that vital statistical information, having those 2 elevator speeches, a short one and a long one, having an outline to help you walk through. Oh, I didn't tell you why the outline is so important. Remember how I said we're kind of bad advocates for our kids? We love them so much. And we think that every little detail about them is so important. And guess what it is? The length of their eyelashes is so important. The fact that they, probably just don't even know that they have Oreos stuck on their mouth is so important. It's all so important. But time is money. And so the Oreos on their mouth might very well be pertinent to some situation. But if it is, make sure it's in the outline so that you stick to the point, because it is so easy to stray away from the point when we're talking about our kids, because we know them so well and we love them so much. And this is so very important. And so it's just really hard to stay on the list. For me, even with an outline, it's hard to stay on the outline. But if I don't have an outline, I'm completely ineffective. So I think if you outline it, you're way more effective and you are way more efficient. And that's important because time is money. Okay, that will wrap us up for today. Don't forget to submit your questions for the podcast. Go over to the SpeakPipe. Don't forget to do the market research. I'll put that link in the show notes as well. It's a Google form, about 15 minutes, and you get the lab for free. And I will see you next week, same time, same place.